Welcome back, everybody, to yet another episode of An Involved Review. I am your host, James Caleb Kitchens. I am joined today, as always, by Caleb Stovall of Stovall Wrestling Network. Caleb, how's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? I love the new profile pic you have for us.
The new profile pic. I got this new Dark Side of the Ring shirt. I just got in off of Pro Wrestling Tees, and
I love
yeah,
that.
man, and we are joined here today. So this is not his first time on an Evolved Review, but this is his first time talking about Dark Side of the Ring with us. Welcome, the PCW General Manager Dave Foster. Welcome back to the show, man.
Hello, or as I like to say, wada. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll leave. I'll see you guys later.
If you haven't seen it, Dave joined me for a really special edition where we reviewed actually something not wrestling related at all. We talked about the Final Fantasy VII remake. So that was a fantastic, fun time. I felt like we could have done 10 hours on that. So go
Yup.
check that out if you haven't seen it. Um, so before we get started today, a lot of people have asked us. Dark Side of the Ring season 2 has wrapped up, and that's mainly what we've been covering. Uh, so people have said, asked me a couple things. And the main question that we get is, when you guys going to do the Owen Hart episode? And then shortly after that is, are you guys going to do all of them? Number one, Dark Side of the Ring's been renewed for season 3, so I'm really happy about that. We are going to do an episode where we're going to speculate on what the topics might be for season 3. Very excited about that. And then also, so we are going to cover the Owen Hart episode, of course. That's probably going to be the last one that we do out of this bunch of episodes we've done about season 1, season 2. We are not going to do them all. So there will be some that we just aren't going to cover, because if I can't sit here and have anything to talk about for 30 minutes to an hour about it, then I don't feel like we should cover it. I'm not going to put out content just to put it out. So we will be covering the Owen Hart episode, and that's going to kind of cap off our season 1 and season 2 coverage, and then we'll get to speculate on what they're going to cover in season 3. So wrestling has no shortage of tragedy, folks.
Yeah.
That being said, so today's episode is pretty unique. If you're watching this, you can already see his photo sitting up there. So today we are finally going to talk about the New Jack episode of Dark Side of the Ring. So if you haven't seen it yet, check it out. It's made by Vice. You can find it on YouTube, Hulu, Google Play, pretty much anywhere. Google Dark Side of the Ring, and you can find it out there. So if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. Then come back and check out this episode. That being said, this may be one of the most hotly anticipated episodes. Now, Dave, I know that this was pretty fantastic, because this episode was kind of your introduction to New Jack, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Philadelphia and I was the worst. Like, just like how I hate the Philadelphia Eagles, I was not a ECW fan at all. It was either on too late or I just didn't have that channel, which is sad. So I missed out on all that stuff. But I definitely feel like in the 43 minutes and 17 seconds that this episode was, I learned a lot about New Jack and how he stabbed someone 9 to 16 times in the ring once or twice, or we'll get to that. But yeah, I really didn't have any like I knew who New Jack was and those things, but I was definitely a WWF guy growing up. So the fact that he never made the jump over there, and they talk about why in the episode, he just was never kind of in like my in my line of sight. So yeah, this was like clean slate. I learned a lot. Hey, just real quick for listeners, don't ever try and binge watch Dark Side of the Ring, like a bunch of episodes back to back to back, because I did that. I watched the Owen Hart one after this, and I'm just in this really weird pit of despair. So I don't know, man. It's been a tough morning.
Completely understandable, man. This one, this episode is unique in that the tragedy isn't really around the subject. Most episodes of Dark Side of the Ring, it's like whoever it's about, that's who the tragedy is happening to. But the tragedy with New Jack is happening to everyone around him because of New Jack.
He is the tragedy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He is a freight train of tragedy just coming at you full speed.
Yeah.
um, no semblance to a freight train, no relation. Um, Caleb Stovall, what
Yes.
what? Give me your overall thoughts on New Jack, man. You were familiar with him before this episode, though, right?
Yes, I was. I started watching ECW literally when it went on TNN. Like I think in '99. And the ironic part is, and they've even said it in ECW documentaries, that I started watching it because I was somewhat of a fan of the Roller Jam that they had on TNN at the time, and ECW would lead in to Roller Jam. And then like I saw it and I was just like, oh, sweet, ECW. So yeah, I became familiar with New Jack, and he was like, anytime he would come out, it was always like, oh shit, someone's about to get killed, kind of thing. Or just it was awesome to see him at the time. Now knowing what I know now, it's not so much. But yeah, I was very familiar with him. And I say this about him. I did not realize. I mean, I know he does horrible things, and we'll get into that. But like, I did not realize how entertaining he is. Like, he is a great talker on the mic. He
He really
really.
is. Yeah, I mean, it's very easy to look at New Jack and talk about all the like terrible, like tragic things he's been involved in. But at the end of the day, I mean, and this is a great segue into the Smoky Mountain Wrestling era. For Jim Cornette to pick this guy up, because that's what's crazy. That's like maybe the craziest thing about it all, is that Jim Cornette's the guy that really gave him his start.
And I had no idea about that. And when I found that out, I went, oh my God, for real?
Well, because we're all so accustomed to like, Cornette can't think outside the box. That's like the current. That's like the mindset right now. It's like Cornette's stuck in this ancient era. So it's hard to imagine Jim Cornette having New Jack and Mustafa as the gangsters come out and do this gimmick in Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and it kind of speaks to New Jack too. Like for Cornette to go after him, he realized that he was an amazing promo. The guy really could get on that microphone and just talk. I mean, and I mean, he was a mile a minute.
Yeah.
And the
I mean, Jim Cornette even says it. He says, if Eddie Murphy was a bad guy, that would be that would be New Jack kind of thing. Like, I was just like, oh my God, that's the best quote ever. Like, if
and
Eddie
I
Murphy was a villain.
and I think that like the thing I liked about or his mentality, so to speak, is that he was not afraid to be a bad guy. I think we see all these, heels that try and be cool heels, and they want to sling t-shirts and like, monetize their heelness, and they don't want people to actually think that they're bad human beings. Like, it's a character. And like New Jack went out there in front of, the way they portrayed it in the show, like pretty racist crowds. And he just lit the match, and he had no problem, because the thing is, he could back it up too. Would you mess with New Jack? No. Would you mess with Mustafa? That guy was crazy, man. Smoking pencil shavings. What a weird story to bring up out of nowhere, by the way. The segue to that was incredible. But like, he had no problem with being a true heel, like in the purest sense. I don't think we have that as much nowadays, because it's risky, man. Because being a true heel back then means, they were talking about how he walked outside and there were people waiting for him. Like, that reminds me of like stories I would hear about like lucha libre wrestling, where like the heels would just get booed out of the building and then people would be waiting for him in the back. Like, and that's crazy, man. It's just crazy how far wrestling has come, just in 20 or 30 years, since this stuff happened. But I really liked it, and the fact that New Jack was able to weave true stuff that was happening. Like, they were talking about how, like, with the Rock and Roll Express, like, they mimicked a racial injustice. Like, they just flipped it, and those people in the crowd were so mad at them for doing that, when really they just took something that happened in the meet, like that actually happened, like a true injustice, and flipped it, and everyone freaked out. And I thought that was the art kind of behind his madness. And yeah, Smoky Mountain Wrestling. If you want to be a heel, just go in there and tell them, yeah, and just start challenging their racism. And those fans ate it up.
And Ricky Morton of all people to sell that angle,
Yeah.
because he's known as one of the best sellers in the history of pro wrestling. And so yeah, I mean, he's sitting there looking people in the audience directly in the eye, help me. And
I just got goosebumps from that.
yeah,
That was incredible.
because I
I love
mean,
the way Jim
you've seen him
Cornette
live.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I love the way Jim Cornette describes him too. He's like, "Help me, help me."
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's how Ricky Morton was, man. I mean, and is. I mean, you know, it's yeah, I mean,
It's where the money is.
anybody else wouldn't have been able to pull that off, I don't think, at least to not as great of an effect.
Mhm.
So, yeah, let's talk about this. Like, this could never happen today, right? This angle could never happen today for several reasons. Number one, um, any reputable wrestling show, if a fan is going to drop the N word, they're going to be taken out and they're not going to be back. For one, uh, if they make it out in any decent condition in the first place. Number two, they talk about even in '95 that the local NAACP wrote them and was like, "We don't like your portrayal of African Americans on the product." And then New Jack comes out and he just goes at it. I mean,
We're
that
not for you. New Jack said, I'm not. Yeah, he basically said, I'm not your agenda.
right.
Like, oh, it's
I
good.
Really? I mean, the stuff that he's saying, is outrageous and whatnot, but he's really creative in his promos. I mean, he really is.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's hard to say it was the best response, but I think it was. I mean, from an entertainment perspective. But today they would obviously shut this down. I mean, the pressure would be immense on a national and possibly international level if something like this happened.
They would just
Um,
take the air.
oh yeah, it would be all over the place. It would be on national news. Um, but it's crazy that they kind of came in with it right at the perfect time where a lot of racism today is like closeted, right? It's definitely not the overwhelming opinion in society. It's definitely not okay to be racist, which I'm glad we've gotten to that point. But during this point in time, there were still people that were fine going out in public and being overtly racist. Um, and so not that that's a good thing, but if it's going to exist, capitalize on it, and that's what New Jack did. Um, you mentioned Mufasa. I love where they're talking about in the interview that it's like he wasn't just doing all that stuff for the interview. He was doing that all day. That's just who he was. And then I love where they immediately asked D'Lo, just kind of out of nowhere, was Mufasa smoking pencil shavings? I love that where he's just like he just busts out laughing. He's like, I plead the fifth.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy. Like, one of the best parts about Dark Side of the Ring, like, so I've been watching a lot of late '90s Attitude Era matches, and I think D'Lo Brown is so underappreciated. And I am so whenever he comes on the screen, I'm just like, man, I, I really hope one day I get the opportunity to meet him because he just seems like a really like good human, and he saw it all, and he was a great worker. And I've been really enjoying, like, with hindsight, like just going back and watching his matches, and I just always felt like he deserved more than he got. But that's just like my weird wrestling hot take. But it's great to see D'Lo. He's great.
um, I mean, D'Lo is amazing. If you haven't seen his best of 3 series with AJ Styles and from TNA,
Oh, it's so good.
it's
Noted. I will watch that. That's awesome.
fantastic. It's from like
Oh, it's
03,
so
04,
good.
where like D'Lo's kind of like the veteran at this point, and you have like a fresh AJ.
Mm-hmm.
Oh God, I mean,
Awesome.
you got to wonder how much of AJ Styles was like, how much D'Lo Brown kind of imprinted on him, and
Oh, he
yeah,
credits a lot. Oh, he credits a lot to D'Lo.
yeah, and I mean they went through the whole thing where he wore the vest, and they did that whole gimmick, and then Roman Reigns did it like, but not sarcastically.
Yeah, he had like what, like a broken rib or like a pulled muscle in his chest, so he wears a chest protector for a year.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah,
It's awesome.
yeah, and he does like the frog splash with it to do like it for extra impact or whatever.
Yeah.
It was sort of a play on, and I always have to bring everything back. Everything that I in wrestling, I either bring it back to DDP or
Yeah.
Eric Bischoff somehow. And DDP did the thing with the ribs where he had broken his ribs, and he wore the gauze around his rib cage, which does nothing whatsoever,
Nope.
except remind people that your ribs are hurt. And so
Yep.
his ribs were injured for like a year and some change because it just worked so well. I mean, people
Yeah.
reacted so heavily to it.
And I think also what people remember about D'Lo Brown is this.
Yes.
Yep.
I think he unfortunately he'll never be in the Hall of Fame now, unfortunately. I don't think, because of doing these episodes. But maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure that the mandate, and we've discussed this, the mandate from WWE is that you're not to comment on or have anything to do with Dark Side of the Ring. So
Great. Well,
yeah.
that's their prerogative. Hall of Fame doesn't even physically exist, so what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I can remember like 10 years ago, like hearing Scott Steiner be like, Hall of Fame, like, why would I want to be in that? It's not even a real thing. And like, I was like mad about it, because I like watching the Hall of Fame and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, but as time goes on, I'm like, he was right.
It's a gimmick, brother.
Yeah, it is a work. It's a work, man. It
Yeah.
is. Yeah,
Everything in WWE is a work.
that's true. That's true. So we get past the Smoky Mountain Wrestling era with New
Mhm.
Jack and the Gangsters, and they get called up to ECW. Could there have been a better fit for the Gangsters than going to Extreme Championship Wrestling?
No, they were tailor made for ECW. Everything about them, the violence that they brought with them, the look, the attitude. I mean, literally everything like screamed ECW for them. In fact, the minute that they showed up at ECW, they were instantly stars.
Mhm.
I mean, they literally went to the top. They went to the top of the tag team divisions. I remember their feud with the Eliminators, which is some great stuff. I mean, I know people might not like hardcore wrestling or whatnot, but just as far as a storyline and the feud that they had, it was amazing. I mean, just some great stuff.
Fine, I'll go back and watch ECW. Gosh.
Caleb has that effect
Fine.
on people.
Yeah.
He got me wanting to watch, go back and watch Hardcore Heaven. What was it, 99?
Yes.
The other week. I was like, damn it, man! I don't have time for this shit. What are we talking about? This is quarantine land. We all have time for everything.
Yeah, it's so much
I
time.
was about to say you got plenty of time nowadays.
Right. Exactly. I don't have to go to work. It's like, not physically anyway. All right. So they get there, and they kind of take a moment at this point in time, and it's very interesting where they place this in the episode. They talk about New Jack's past at this point, and it's interesting they put it here because it's like, okay, we're gonna put it right here so that you have some sort of context for the horrific acts that you're about to see. So they talk about his childhood, where his dad walked into the house, stabbed his mother 5 times. Uh, I mean, first of all, insane that anybody grows up in that sort of environment. And then months later, when his mother tries to leave, he pulls out a gun and shoots her in the leg.
Yeah.
And this was all definitely new information to me. I mean, with New Jack, you always hear about the crazy sensational things that he's done. Um, what did you guys think about this? Because to me, I was like, man, this really kind of explains the background that this dude came from, and you do kind of feel sorry for him to an extent.
I think they did place it perfectly, because if they put it at the beginning of the episode, it would have been almost too soon. Like, you had to get to that point. But the whole thing with ECW was, to blur like they were the ultimate blur the lines between, what's scripted and reality. At least in my opinion, they probably did the best out of anyone, because anytime I watched ECW, it was blood and guts and like and all that stuff. I just feel like he has a real name, I forget off the top of my head, but like because of his upbringing, he was New Jack. And they even talk about it at the end of the episode. I think Cornette says, I don't even know if I've ever met, the person behind New Jack.
Oh, no.
Yeah, yes. So I think it explains a lot, but that he probably had a lot of rage inside of him from all that stuff happening. You kind of see it in his face, like as he talks about it. But I mean, nature versus nurture. I mean, if you grew up in that environment, if you grew up in a violent environment, chances are you have a better shot at being a violent person. And he found a way to monetize his violence, and just sometimes he took it too far.
Yes, and we are going to get into one of such instances right now. So we get to the mass transit incident, which is unfortunately probably the thing that he is the most famous for. This isn't the most violent thing New Jack ever did, but it is the thing that he's the most famous for because it made pretty big, I mean, national news in some instances. So in ECW, so we have a very unique instance here. So we have Tiny the Terrible. He talks. He's one of the guests on this episode.
One of the most entertaining people too, besides New Jack.
Yeah,
He's fantastic.
fantastic characters. Yeah,
I want to see a documentary just about this guy.
right.
Like, I want an hour and a half of this dude's life. I want it. Netflix, hear me. And so there's this video that comes out on the net, and this is like really early internet days, so it's not like YouTube where there's like 20 billion videos out or whatever, or the tapes get around. There were still videotape exchanges going on back then of Eric Kulas working with these little people. That's what we're going to choose to call them for the episode. I don't know what the correct term is. um, and so yeah, so the this video gets out of this big guy kind of working with them. And I mean, you take one look at Eric Kulas, aka Mass Transit here, and you're like, I mean, you can look at the video. This guy's not professionally trained. But,
No.
Who knows who had actually seen the video. So they bring him in because he's working with these guys and they want it to be this kind of different, kind of entertaining sideshow act. New Jack's opponent for the evening doesn't show up, so Eric Kulas kind of goes into business for himself. Now, I will go ahead and say that I don't feel incredibly sorry for Eric Kulas here. The guy seems like he was kind of an asshole, just being honest. For one, he lies about his age. Not that it's not on the promoter to check ID and stuff like that, but I mean, if you doubt that this dude is, of age, but this is also a different time. Who knows if there was even like a commission or anything in that state or that area at the time. Seems like there clearly wasn't. He comes in, lies about his age, and then politics his way into a match with New Jack. And then he proceeds to go up to this veteran, this industry veteran, and this guy's never been in a professional match really in his life. He's not trained, and proceeds to kind of tell him what he's going to do to him. And if you're unfamiliar with this kind of thing, I mean, yes, that is considered to be incredibly disrespectful in professional wrestling. If you're that new and you're in the ring with somebody who's a veteran of that status, you're pretty much letting them lead the entire thing. Um, what did you guys think about this prior to watching what actually happened in the match?
Well, so yeah, I saw everything leading up to it, and I mean, yeah, he lies about his age. First of all, New Jack was facing two people. Well, the gangsters were gangstas, I should say, were in a tag match. It was supposed to
Right.
be Devon Dudley and Axel Rotten, and of course,
Yep.
Axel couldn't make it. And Devon Dudley even when talking about this incident on the ECW, the rise and fall of ECW for WWE. I mean, he said this kid came in and he looked like Ralph Crandon, and it's very true. I mean, you look at this guy, and I'm just like, oh, dude, like. I don't see how anyone could not see that this kid was not ready for this type of thing. But to your point, I doubt in ECW that they even had a talent commission or, a Jim Ross type character looking at these, guys. So, Heyman probably just said, oh, you want to work tonight? All right, cool, kind of thing. Um, and the only thing that I had heard about this incident was, from the Rise and Fall ECW DVD. And when they said it, like all they said was just New Jack beat him up pretty badly, or they said the mass transit incident. And I was but they didn't really say what it was that he did. And I had always wondered. I was like, okay, what was so bad? Like I don't understand, exactly what happened. And then you get to the match, and you're like, oh, that's what happened.
An attempt of murder. Oh,
Yes.
okay. But
Yeah.
it comes like I always think back to like, can you imagine the 17-year-old kid? Like it was probably like his trainer, a trainer. There's plenty of trainers out there. Probably went up to him and be like, and probably gave him some bad advice. So this kid, full of ego, he got his big break. Probably I just can't imagine him going up to be like, hey, New Jack, yeah, come here. All right, so I'm gonna give you 2 chair shots. I'm gonna suplex you, throw you out of the ring, power bomb, finish. And then hold it at that. And New Jack just like I would, because I've had the pleasure of being in a lot of locker rooms. If anyone ever did that, someone from across the room would turn their head and go, like everyone would just bury the guy. And so New Jack, once again, New Jack's upbringing and all these things, and it kind of got me thinking about, and you'll see it in other examples, New Jack's kind of his not disrespect for authority, but then you see a guy, in his 70s saying, hey, just follow my lead, kid. And like, he didn't take kindly of that either. Like, so New Jack very much wanted to be in control of his matches. And if he felt like he was in any ways, shape or form disrespected, there was no governor that a lot of us have. There's no governor on him that would stop him from going from the things he's thinking about doing to actually doing them in a match. And I think that's where a lot of people got in trouble, and that's where New Jack got himself in trouble. There was just no filter at all. Like he just went out and stabbed people in the ring.
And how about the best reaction to the mass transit incident was my favorite one, was the Sandman. He's like, oh, so that's why New Jack went and basically killed him. Nah, it makes sense.
All of Sandman's commentary on this is gold.
Yeah.
I mean,
he looked pretty good too. I was surprised because I know he's gone through some hard times, and like he didn't look too bad.
yeah, I mean, he looked good, and I mean, the thing is, like, I, hopefully nothing tragic enough happens where he needs his own episode of this. But can we get Sandman on for some more episodes? I mean, it's good stuff. I mean, there's a reason that this has become Vice's like most watched show, and yeah, Sandman is incredibly entertaining in this episode. So
And
we.
real quick, I was gonna say, I can imagine the kid walking up to New Jack, and this is probably New Jack's reaction. You want to do what?
That's one thing we haven't talked about is just how candidly New Jack talks about his rampant cocaine use throughout the entire episode.
I was in the back snorting, getting high.
Yeah.
I introduced it into ECW. Yeah.
I mean, honestly, this guy, like, I mean, this episode in general, I think this episode has the most like editing censorship in it, where because there's got to be 100 f-bombs or more in this episode. There's times where it's like, yeah, and then I was doing, it's just crazy, and yeah, there's a lot of f-bombs dropped in this episode. So he's doing cocaine all day, as he says, and he gets into this situation where this obviously untrained, incredibly green kid comes up and talks about all the stuff he wants to do to him. And he tells Paul Heyman before he goes out, he's like, they're going to be talking about what I do to this kid for 10 years, and
20
as he says, yeah, it's been over 20 years and they're still talking about it. So, ugh. That being said, yeah, I mean, the actual footage of this match is kind of tough to watch. They tossed Devon out there like, hey, stay out of the ring. And I mean, they just laid into this kid, and then especially when you get to the point where he starts like stabbing him, and you see him like slice him across the forehead, and there's just like this
with
fountain
a
of blood.
surgical knife.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously he's got this like it's a surgical knife. The first couple of times he stabs him, he's like nothing happened. Well, yeah, because the knife's so sharp that it's going to take a minute for anything to actually come up as far as blood. And so he just slices them. And I mean, probably almost to the damn bone.
Yep.
And this kid's just got like a fountain of blood pouring out his head. And his dad's at ringside. And this is where it's like incredibly tragic. His dad's at ringside, like yelling, like, he's 17. Where's the ref? And I'm like, you brought
Uh,
your kid to this knowing that they were 17 years old. I mean, it doesn't justify what happened to them, but I mean, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say Eric Kulos's dad was kind of a piece of shit, especially knowing what we find out after with his encounter with New Jack after this.
Yeah.
I mean, I can see where people say that, but so you know, they have another podcast. It's called Dark Side of the Podcast, and it's hosted by Conrad Thompson of all people. And it's with the executive producers, and they talked about they really wanted to get um Goulash's mother for this, but to her the incident is just it's so tragic, and it brings up a lot of bad memories for her, because here's actually what happened, which is what they didn't get to say on this one, is that Eric went into a deep depression after that, which is, he dies of gastro bypass surgery, or something went wrong basically. But it was because of this incident. Like, he went into this deep depression. But not only did he go into it, so did his brother. And I don't know what his brother's name is and everything. And so did his father. Like, when they lost the trial and everything like that, it was a really bad time. And that was not necessarily covered in this, because I mean, they really couldn't. There was nothing much they could say on it, but apparently it was really, really bad, to the point where Eric dies, but then his brother ends up, I believe, committing suicide 2 or 3 years later. So
Yeah,
it was it. So the incident is really worse than people think that it is.
Yeah.
yeah.
Like,
I mean, it ruined a lot of lives, to be honest.
so, I mean, we can say he was a piece of shit, and he might have been. I mean, if you ask Tiny the Terrible, he was, because, Tiny, like, when they got to the show, Eric snubbed him and was like, nope, we're not doing that. He wanted to work his way into an angle and stuff like that. But still, that's just, there's that level of, he just went too far with it, man, you know? And then what was even bad was not even the cut also, but it was the fact of Mustafa tries to pick him up in a scoop slam, and you can clearly tell this kid can't post or do anything at this point, and he boom drops him on his head.
Yep.
I mean, he dropped straight on his head, and it was just, oof, it was brutal.
Yeah, it's tough to watch, man. I had seen this episode twice, and then I was like, damn it, I gotta watch it again for the show. And I'm sitting here just like, man, this is not any easier to watch again. Uh, and I mean, it is really tragic. I mean, on the one hand, you've got Eric Kulas and his father like clearly lying to get him on the show, but I mean, you didn't sign up for this. You didn't sign up for attempted murder, So definitely
Or
not trying to justify New Jack's actions here.
or maybe, in his father's defense a little bit, maybe his father, like he convinced his father, hey, this isn't going to be that bad, kind of thing. I'm just going in here to do this thing and get a little
It's all fake.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
that legit could have been, what he said to his father, like, oh no, this is gonna be fine. Y'all can come watch it and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's not the way it turned out.
there were multiple times in this episode where, because I'm queasy, it's probably why I wasn't the biggest ECW fan, because the sight of blood I'm just a wimp with it. And there were multiple times in the episode where I was like, keep your eyes open, Dave. You can do this. Like, you can watch this stuff. And like, that was one of them where, and they talked about how, like, when he was back in the van, like, he peeled the stitches away and he just like looked at the flap of skin that's just hanging. Man, like, he did go too far. But we see instances of wrestlers taking advantage of like unexperienced wrestlers. I still hear stuff about things like that. Like, while this is the most extreme case, it happens a lot, and it comes from people not getting the right training, getting bad advice, and then trying to come up to a veteran in the business. And I mean, this kid checked all the wrong boxes. Not saying that is anything that New Jack not saying New Jack didn't take advantage of that, because he absolutely did. But, it was just all in all really bad scenario for everyone involved. And in fact, like all these instances, I'm sure we'll get to the other 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or instances of kind of New Jack taking it too far. It all just seemed like this weird perfect storm, and he was just the catalyst that made it go too far.
Agreed. Yeah, I mean, so this incident makes national news. Like I said before, it's definitely the thing that New Jack is possibly most famous for. Uh, and I mean, in the interview, after the fact, at a house show, this did happen at a house show actually. He gets on the mic and he's like, and he says, and I'm quoting, I don't care if the motherfucker dies. He's white. I don't like white people. I don't like people from Boston.
Yeah, that's not something that does I'm using the Jim Cornette quote. That's not something that does the image of pro wrestling really good.
Right.
In the national media, and the media already hates wrestling as it is, so it's just like, oh, we got him now.
Right. Yeah, they just jump on this kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
I'm so surprised that he didn't get prosecuted. Like, I'm so amazed at the amount of times like he didn't go to jail for doing these types of things. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many times he was close, and this is one of the most interesting parts of the episode too, is Paul Heyman working them at the trial. I mean, we all know that Paul Heyman is a fantastic artist when it comes to the art of the work, and he just laid it all out. I mean, he really, his testimony probably got New Jack off in this instance, especially also the finding out that he lied about his age and the confrontation between his dad and New Jack after the fact. I mean, he probably would have served some sort of time at this point if it weren't for this. Um, so let's go forward and talk about Vic Grimes. So,
this one I've been waiting to talk about.
so 2000, Vic Grimes and New Jack are doing this spot where they're up on this kind of like small scaffold or whatever, and all of a sudden Vic Grimes is kind of pussies out at the last second. And it is sort of a thing, like, you don't, it's just kind of a bad etiquette to call something in the back and then you get out there and hesitate because you can put somebody in danger, especially in an instance like this. You definitely don't do it with New Jack, and New Jack ends up cracking his skull open. That fall was incredibly hard to watch also, because he's lucky he survived, and I don't know if they checked him out for brain damage, but I mean, it's New Jack, so who could tell? I mean, who could say either way, right?
Yeah.
And they glossed over it too. It's almost like I had to rewind because I missed, because you're going to talk about the second time they met, but like with the scaffolding, like I was like, wait, why is he so mad at this guy? And like I feel like they really just like glossed over it very quickly. But that was just me. But I knew about the incident before. But yeah, you can't say you're going to do something and not do it. That's how someone literally cracks their skull.
Oh man, we're not going to talk about the second time they met. We're gonna skip right over that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, right.
So for some reason, it is envisioned that after New Jack comes back from having his skull cracked open by Vic Grimes, that they will have a rematch in a scaffold match. And there's a
Yeah.
reason that like WWE never made this a thing. It's because there's a high likelihood of severe injury or even death. Watching, I mean, so number one, he buys like a real taser, like the cattle prod quality, like riot gear taser, and tases this dude in the match with it. I mean, and that was hard to watch in the first place. And he's like sitting there yelling, like, I can't feel my legs, whatever, whatever.
I said, you ain't gonna need him.
Right.
Yeah.
That toss, knowing that the dude's legs are numb, he can't do anything to try to take a bump correctly or steady himself. New Jack's completely unapologetic at this point.
Oh yeah.
In the Eric Kulas incident, you can kind of see where some things happen to where Eric Kulas is not completely the victim in this situation, but in this situation with Vic Grimes here, I think this is a completely unprofessional, entirely uncalled for act by New Jack here, where he tosses him off the scaffolding. I mean,
Yeah.
Jim Cornette says it best. I can't believe he wasn't paralyzed or dead. And New Jack says, I want him to hit the floor. I just didn't throw him hard enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
The fuck?
Yeah, he actually I found out about this incident. Well, I saw this on a DVD someone had given me when I was at the gym one time. I made friends with this guy who claimed that he actually wrestled for this promotion. I never saw him in the promotion, so whatever. But the promotion is called XPW, which was owned by Rob Black at the time. And that promotion is one of the worst promotions I've ever seen because it was hardcore wrestling, but it was owned by, I'm not kidding this, porn like people. Like literally Rob Black had produced porn and stuff like that. And then he thought, hey, let's combine porn and wrestling together. What could be better, right? Oh my God. And so I saw this on a DVD and I saw the match and stuff like that. First of all, the scalpel is like way too high. Like it's even higher than Jim Cornette's fall. Like I don't know what they were thinking when they made that and everything like that. But when I heard New Jack describe this particular match, he described it on Forever hardcore documentary that Jeremy Borash produced. And it was kind of like also the untold part of the rise and fall of ECW. It had New Jack, it had Shane Douglas, it had a bunch of people that weren't on the rise and fall of ECW. And New Jack talks about that. And when he said it, like he literally says in the documentary, he's like, "Oh, I was trying to kill him. I was literally trying to kill him." And when I heard that, I immediately lost all respect. I was like, "Okay, I don't ever want to hear anything you have to say," kind of thing. Like, because think about this, wrestling is already dangerous enough just with the regular moves that people do day in and day out in wrestling. And you trust someone, you trust them with your life to make sure, hey, you're going to do this move right and stuff like that. And I'm going to help you. And we're both going to go home at the end of the day. We're going to go to our families. We're going to, go eat and do all this kind of stuff. And when you have an incident like this, it makes you like rethink everything. It's just like, whoa, like I did not know someone could be that heartless in this point, to want to try to actually kill him, not just kill him, but think about this, Kill him on live television. I mean, where people like say he had died. All they would have to do is, where's the evidence? I'll just watch the video. Just watch it, kind of thing. And the most ironic part to me is that he was trying to kill him, but the only thing that happened to him was he got a dislocated ankle. Like, but he's so lucky because, yeah, Jack's like tasing him and stuff like that on top of the scaffold, and he tries to throw him. Then what was even worse about that was there were all these tables that were in the middle of the ring. I'm thinking, what the, like, who made that call? That's what I want to know, is if you knew these guys, like, I don't even know if they knew these guys had that much heat with each other, but I just want to know, like, okay, who was the bright idea that thought, all right, well, you know what, we're going to do this cool storyline and stuff like that. That's just people who don't know what they're doing in wrestling and do not need to be running a wrestling promotion. And XPW is like the perfect example of that. It's one of the worst promotions I've ever seen in my life.
Great. Now I want to go watch that because I want to hate watch it, like the whole, all their collections on VHS or something. Yeah, it was.
So take like Japanese deathmatch wrestling, and then put it with a bunch of like fat guys and old like out of shape guys.
Cool.
That's what it is.
I'm looking forward to that. Run by pornography producer.
Yes.
I can't think of anything better I want to watch on loop.
In fact, that night, I'm not kidding. As opposed to the scaffold match that was there was also a match that night called a buck naked match, where it's a bra and panties match, only you have to strip them completely nude. So go figure.
Oh my goodness. Jeez.
And here's what's so bad about it. All right. They knew damn well that they could not do that on pay-per-view. Like, well, especially, maybe they could do it on pay-per-view, but they could not do that in front of a live audience. That's like the arena will step in and be like, no, you cannot do that. So here's what they did. They look like they're about to strip her and everything. Then the lights go out for no unapparent reason. They just go out. And then they're like, they come up with a message on the screen of like, that was bullshit. The audience got robbed, but you at home won't. And so then all they do is just show a bunch of porn images. I was just like, oh my God, what the fuck am I watching?
Yeah.
And here's my thing. It had something like, let's just say something terrible, like even worse than a dislocated ankle, obviously, had happened to Vic Grimes. Who was there that was equipped to help him?
Right.
I'm sure there was a woman there dressed as a nurse, but I don't know if that would have made her a nurse.
Hey, she might have given him, mouth-to-mouth reception, brought him back to life, kind of thing.
Yep.
Man, the worst part about that fall to me, he falls and hits the tables and like slides off them and hits that top rope, man. Those ring ropes are not, that's not the thing you want to hit at all. I've been dropped from a much lower height onto some ring ropes and had like a bruise about a foot in diameter that was like green and blue and purple and all kinds of stuff. Those things are not forgiving. It is a miracle the dude wasn't paralyzed or killed in this instance. So this would not be the last time that New Jack would do something incredibly insane. And as Cornette sort of almost narrates here, New Jack got into this scenario where his gimmick is that he does these extreme, just completely off the rails things, and so it's kind of become his job to do this. It's the gimmick, and so he's constantly having to invent ways to take things up to another level.
And real quick, could that be a credit to what he took from his trainer that trained him in the wrestling business, Ray Candy? Because
Yeah.
remember, he said it in the beginning. He said, Ray Candy told me you got to create something that they've never seen before. And his reaction was, what kind of a mind fuck is that? Kind of thing. And so he probably took that and said, okay, well, they've never seen anything like this before.
I mean, it's incredibly sound advice, but you gave it to the wrong guy.
Kind of thing.
He's like, all right, you know. So 2003, we have the Gypsy Joe incident. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one, but this is another one that's just way off the rails. I mean, this is the point where we're getting where no national company can afford to have New Jack on the show. They may have wanted to, but the liability involved is just absurd, right? So you've got all this going on, and now he's on like the small time independent scene, and the independent scene then is nowhere near the way that it is now. You've got these little shows being run in armories, and you've got 30, 50 people there, and yet they're still trying to bring in people like New Jack and I mean Gypsy Joe at the time, and I mean the independent scene was just nowhere near the level of sophistication that it usually is today. I use that point strongly because there is, of course, still some incredible amounts of bullshit that take place on the indie scene. Um,
Yeah, there's this place called Viral Pro
oh
Wrestling,
yeah, fuck those guys.
and like, ugh,
Yeah, the worst.
the worst.
This episode brought to you
W.
by Viral Pro Wrestling.
Viral Pro
Uh,
Wrestling.
um, Gypsy Joe comes in, 72-year-old man, and nobody bothers to tell New Jack the gimmick that he's supposedly impervious to pain, so he's not selling the stuff. And New Jack beats the ever loving shit out of this old man, and it is incredibly difficult to watch this also. What did you guys think about this?
Uh, well, first of all, I didn't even know that this incident happened.
Me either.
And I think Chris Jericho, the narrator, you're one of your favorites. Um, I think he does a good job of saying it like, you know, at this point in time when this incident happens, you know, hardcore wrestling, while it's not as popular, it's being taken to new levels and levels that personally it should not go ever already. So because you had Combat Zone Wrestling or CZW at the time, and I mean, like the images that they were showing of what people were doing, like you had people suplexing each other onto barbed wire beds. You had people literally cutting, like not doing it the old fashioned way. I mean, they would literally cut their opponents and stuff like that. There's instances where they were hanging people with their skin, stuff like that. It's just it's absolutely ridiculous. And then here you get New Jack, who already goes further than anybody. And then you put him with a 72-year-old man, and he even says it. He's like, I saw how old he was, but then I forgot.
Yep.
And the guy comes up to him, and I'm not excusing New Jack or anything like that further, but the guy comes up to him and is just like, just follow my lead, kid. You could learn something. Now, by this point, New Jack has been in the business since 1994 or something like that, maybe 95. But around that, so he knows what he's doing I mean, for the most part, he knows what he's doing in the ring and stuff like that. So, that probably pissed him off. And of course, he was, like he said, getting high, snorting cocaine and stuff like that. And when you do that, all bets are off. He's just going out there and doing whatever. I didn't realize how bad it was though. When he grabbed the bat, that was when like I had to turn away. I was like, oh God, like I mean, he legit was striking him in the head. And anyone who's ever like had to deal, I guess, with attackers or anything like that will tell you like a bat with one shot can break your arm or it can kill you. kind of thing. Like I don't know how this man is not dead right now. I don't know if he is dead or not, but I don't know how he's not dead after that. And when I saw it, I'm sitting there going, I'm like, why didn't someone from the back run out and be like, hey man, stop beating this old man with a bat?
Yeah, I mean, you got to wonder where security was at this point.
But you have to. I mean, you've been to shows where there's 10 people in the crowd and there is no security. Security is the youngest person that's training with the company, or there is no security. I mean, it's crazy to think how some of these shows, especially back then, even though it was only 15 years ago, something like that, how just little restrictions and regulations there were on it to where no one steps in. I mean, throughout literally all of these things, no one ever steps in to confront New Jack, ever,
Right.
ever.
And they probably were scared.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They probably don't want to
absolutely.
get stabbed or shot or whatever.
Yeah.
Or tased.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of the most severe incident here that happens, and this is what kind of kills his career, and like this incident finally makes people realize, like, okay, bringing New Jack onto your show in any capacity is probably a terrible idea. Even though TNA did bring him in for a short stint, um, you know, uh,
That was way before this incident, though.
yeah, no, because he was on Hardcore Justice.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, him and
Oh, I didn't know
Mustafa
that.
came out in 2010 on Hardcore Justice, and beat up Team 3D.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Well, in that instance, I mean, in that instance, it's probably like, well, I mean, we can keep him,
right.
you know.
They knew each other. He was
Yeah.
familiar with the Dudleys. They had a good relationship. It was a much safer kind of concept, and they probably told him, like, dude, look, you do anything out of line, we're gonna swarm the ring with security. We're gonna toss you out of here.
Oh,
Um, so this last incident is at Thunder Wrestling Federation, which already sounds like your income tax indie show. Um,
Save
already.
that for later. That's a good one.
Oh yeah, you're welcome for that. Um,
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I'll kiss that one, blow it to you.
Oh,
Uh,
thank you.
um, and so the promoter here, when they talk to him, I'm just like, I have known some promoters in my day, but this guy, like, I don't know. I mean, he definitely had no business running a wrestling promotion.
no.
So New
He does
Jack,
have some great music.
yeah, I mean the music. He seemed like he was a pretty good recording artist. Uh, so so during the match, so he ends up going up against William Lane is the guy. William Jason Lane is the guy's name. I don't know if that was his ring name or if it's real name or both.
That's his real name. His ring name is Hunter Red.
Oh, amazing. That's
Definitely with two D's. It definitely has two D's. If I'm
uh,
gonna say REDD, it's gotta.
what an indie-tastic name.
Yeah.
I bet he came
Came
out.
out of Stricken by Disturbed or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I
Yeah.
would have said Skillet, but they weren't out yet.
Yep. Or just Headstrong by Trapped.
Oh
You know.
Jesus, yes.
Yeah.
In this era, like
Yeah.
2000, what was this, 2004? Yeah, it was definitely
Yeah,
Headstrong by
man.
Trapped.
Oh yeah.
For sure.
Hell, he could have been listening to the band Red.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably where he got the name from.
Might have been.
So he comes out, and this guy, I mean, I hate to say he deserved this, but this guy seems like he literally was trying to manhandle New Jack. Um, and yeah, that was a terrible idea to begin with, but of course, New Jack then takes his retaliation way over the line, pulls out a blade from his pocket, which who wrestles with a knife in their pocket in the first place? New Jack.
New Jack. Yeah.
And stabbed him 16 times. And at this point, he finally, is brought up on felony charges. And the way that he gets out of this one is almost brilliant.
Yeah.
Horrible, but brilliant. And that might be a way to describe New Jack altogether. But he tells the guy in the jail, like the guy comes to see him in jail, and he's like, "Hey, I think we could take this on the road. You stabbed me 16 times. Let's go all around the U.S. and make it a thing." First off, no. S- But New Jack's like, "Yeah, man, but you got to drop the charges."
Obviously.
The guy drops the charges, and New Jack gets the hell out of town, and basically like never communicates with this guy again.
Well, actually, the guy never got back to him.
Well, that's true. That's true. I don't know if he had a way to.
The way that they described the guy, like I think he asked for the match with New Jack, and they gave it to him. And then when he went over to New Jack and sat down with New Jack, New Jack was talking to him, and then halfway through going through their match, he just gets up and walks away. Like I think this guy had some, I wish they maybe had like a couple more minutes to go into this story, because this guy definitely, there was either a different motive or the guy wasn't quite right in his head going into it. But New Jack corrected him. Like,
Yeah.
like I just don't understand what's there to prove when, like, if you're trying to big league New Jack, which actually, like, that's kind of what keeps happening to New Jack, and that's what causes him to lash out. People keep trying to big league him, like, the big guy that eventually died, the old guy that might be dead, I don't know. This guy, I mean, they all just tried to big league him before the match, and New Jack just felt disrespect, and he was like, and this guy actually like went after him and punched, like he was hitting him really hard in the corner.
He was wailing on him.
And I'm not gonna go after literally any wrestler, or probably anyone on this planet could probably beat me up. But I certainly, even if I thought I was the toughest guy ever, I certainly wouldn't start trying to pick a fight with someone that will take it further than you are willing to take it. And he learned that lesson real quick.
The fight's not over until New Jack says it's over.
Yeah, yep.
I mean, I love that his argument in his defense of this is that the police report says that he stabbed him 16 times, and New Jack's like, "I only stabbed him 9 times. I counted. It was only 9 times."
It's like,
Your Honor, it was only 9 times.
Yeah.
The bad part too, with this match in particular, was there was only like 20 people there.
it was
Nobody there.
Indie wrestling has come such a long way, even in the past like 10 years. Just like you look at those things, it looked like it was like a ballroom at like a Ramada Inn or something like that. And just like, yeah, there was, and then you look at like WrestleCon, where it's like a gajillion people, like there's not enough chairs and it's so big. And but yeah, man, it's like it was such like a throwaway show. Like this just shouldn't have happened at all.
Yeah. I mean, I always kind of marvel at like Dragon Con wrestling, because I went to that back in like 2010 for the first time, and it was very similar to this. Like there was just like some guardrails, and there was more sections of guardrails than there were people in the crowd, more than
Right.
likely, and people were just kind of coming in and out. And then now, the 3 biggest ballrooms that they have access to, they've combined all of them, and there's literally a line. Once they filled those to capacity, which is like 2,500 people, there's still a line outside waiting on people to leave so that you can get a seat. I mean, it really has just, I mean, exploded and come a long way since
Mhm.
then. And thankfully, like, New Jack has not stabbed anyone there, to my knowledge. So, but I mean, if I was going to get stabbed allegedly 16 or 9 times, I would like for it to at least be in front of a decent audience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And the thing is, he was stabbing him in the back of the shoulder and like the back of the neck. And man, like you don't really need to be stabbed all that. Like, how did this guy come away with it and not die? Like, if you get stabbed in the neck like once, usually that's it.
Yeah.
I don't-
He was insanely lucky
Yeah,
that he didn't
Hell,
like cut his
leave
spine or
that.
something. Yeah, yeah. I mean, because it's not like paramedics were on the scene like instantly, you know.
Mm.
So yeah, I mean that kind of wraps up the the life and crimes of New Jack here. I mean, after this, he kind of, he wrestled some kind of more obscure or equally obscure indie shows up until I think 2012. He competed for like CZW or something, and that's the last time I know of that he's been really in any kind of active competition. So let's sum this one up, Dave, man. So this was your introduction to New Jack, and what a fantastic introduction to a staple of New Jack. Does this episode put New Jack on your Mount Rushmore? And what did you think about it?
Okay, what? Mount Well, yeah, I mean, there's Flair, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, and New Jack now. I guess Undertaker's gone. I mean,
Poor guy.
yeah. No, it was really fascinating, and I don't think I would have watched it if you didn't ask me to be on the show, because the deathmatch scene. Well, I mean, it truly was deathmatch for him. Like, that was not a gimmick. That was real. Like, it just never really appealed to me as a wrestling fan, and to people that it does, whatever, it's fine. But it was cool to kind of get out of my comfort zone, and by comfort zone, I mean when I was watching parts of this, I was like this, like I just watching him stab that guy 9 to 16 times allegedly was interesting. Also, I don't know. This is just rumor, but to me, did he date Terry Runnels?
New Jack?
Yeah.
I mean, I have never heard
Allegedly.
it. Yeah, allegedly. I've never heard like an official account of
Yeah,
this.
I just found that was like, that's a odd couple, at least in my head. But yeah, it's just interesting to see the dark side of the ring with New Jack. I mean, it's and he's still alive, and I like how they asked him at the end, if they made a documentary, because they were essentially asking him how he wanted to end the episode. At the end, they asked him, if there was a movie made about you, what would you want the final scene to be? And it's literally just him in a wheelchair, just snorting so much cocaine and drinking so much vodka. And I was like, yeah, I mean, he's not apologetic for what he did. It's not my place to really judge him as a human being, whether or not he should be. But I mean, it was just a wild ride on like a part of wrestling that I just never really was privy to beforehand.
Yeah, agreed. Caleb, man, what was your kind of overall thoughts on this episode?
Well, like I said, going into this episode, I was already leery of it because, I mean, I knew about the Vic Grimes incident and I knew they were going to touch on that. And again, that when I heard what he had to say about it, I lost all respect for him after that hardcore documentary that came out. But still, I love the way he explains stuff though. Like even the scaffold, he's like, I can't feel my legs. You ain't gonna need them. Bomb away. Like, just it sounds like the way Jericho would describe how an angle goes together, kind of thing. If you get what I'm saying. But my overall thoughts on New Jack is just, I mean, obviously he will never be mentioned by the WWE and he will never work there because it's too much of a liability. He will never be booked on any big promotion because they will not allow it. And if you're a small time indie promoter who has, thinks that, yeah, I could bring New Jack on and he could bring like a little publicity, don't. Because you don't know what kind of trouble you're asking for. But I think there's also an underlying thing here too, which is the fact of every place that he did this, there was one common denominator: no security, no paramedics, no nothing, no structure. When you have no structure, talents just do whatever they want to do then. Um, I and I understand. We've heard about it in the ring. People take advantage of people all the time, or some guys will hit harder than others, kind of thing. Like Hunter Red was like actually striking him. Now, probably a rational human being would probably, fire back at him and be like, "Hey, man, don't hit me like that again." And then it's an understanding of, okay, well, now let's just go out and have a match, kind of thing. But in this instance, it's like, hey, punch me, 3 times. I'm gonna stab you 16, kind of thing. Like I don't know why that immediately went through his head. Like that was the immediate thing that he had to do was just stab him, kind of thing. But he's had a rough childhood. He's had, and plus, not a lot of people know what he did before wrestling. Like, Jim Cornette says it. He's like, I heard he was a bounty hunter. I heard all of this. They've heard he was a drug dealer or something like that, kind of thing. So we don't know exactly all of his past. We just know that little bit about his childhood. I mean, hell, who knows what he did after that, kind of thing, to survive, and stuff like that. But again, even with all of this horrible stuff, he still is just one entertaining dude. He's golden on the mic. I did not realize how good he was on the mic until I saw some of those Smoky Mountain promos, and then just him in the commentary for this episode. Um, but I think the thing that sums up New Jack the most is the fact that they ask everyone. They're like, "So who is Jerome Young?" And they said, "I don't know Jerome Young. I just know New Jack." And even Jim Cornette, who does not think outside the box and thinks wrestling has to be, this certain way, he's like, "I don't know if I ever met Jerome Young, and I don't think I want to, because here's a guy I can halfway believe in," kind of thing. I mean, New Jack just got way too into his character. And one more thing, like, let's look at where the New Jack name came from. It's from the movie New Jack City, which is like a straight gangster movie with Wesley Snipes in it. It's a good movie, actually. Um, and so that's where he gets his stuff. And then at the time, he also got the NWA at the time, not the National Wrestling Alliance. you know,
The other NWA.
yeah, the other NWA, like they showed the video, the "Fuck the Police" single and stuff like that. So he just got way too much into his character, but he messed up a lot of lives in the process, kind of thing. So I think what people just kind of take away from the episode is that they just think whatever they want to of New Jack at this point. It's just, hey, you either like him or you don't. But here's a story.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a fine line of where, like, you kind of have to decide where you're at on it. Of, can you find him entertaining and also completely condemn his actions?
Right?
So you got to kind of figure out where you stand on that. But this is definitely such a unique episode of Dark Side of the Ring. New Jack is just like, I mean, if the guys at Dark Side of the Ring advice, if they didn't know about New Jack, when they found out about him, they were just probably like, "Holy shit, this is just a treasure trove for us."
Actually, they talked about that on their podcast because someone suggested to them New Jack, or that was one of them that was suggested. And they were like, "I don't know if there's enough that we can, get on him." And then they looked and they went, "Oh, no, wait, never mind. We can write a whole show."
Yeah, he might be a season.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I mean, but yeah, this is definitely one of the most entertaining yet shocking episodes. Um, let's wrap it up though. I think we pretty much covered all the bases here. Dave Foster, absolutely a pleasure having you today, man. Thank you for joining us. I'm so glad we had somebody on here who was kind of fresh to New Jack. I think that was I couldn't have planned that out any better. I didn't plan it out actually. I had no idea. So,
Yeah. Yeah, pleasure.
fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Thank you for being here. And then, as always, Caleb Stovall, thank you for joining me every single week on this. And you can hear more of him on the Stovall Wrestling Network. And yeah, so we've got some exciting episodes coming up. I've talked about the Owen Hart episode that we will eventually do. But that's all for today, folks. This has been an Involved Review.